Well, South Korea is set to begin a controversial pilot program to hire foreign workers as domestic helpers for the first time. 100 Filipinos are in Seoul preparing to start work next Tuesday. But the program, which aims to support working parents and boost falling birth rates, has come under intense scrutiny. CNA's senior Korea correspondent Lim Yun Suk finds out more.
100 Filipino workers arrived in South Korea to begin their training earlier this month. They were picked based on criteria like having a caregiver license and English and Korean language skills. That's according to the Seoul Metropolitan Government, which oversees the program with the Labor Ministry. One worker said in a video distributed to media that she was excited to start work here.
가사 관리사 자격증은 있습니다. 한국 문화를 많이 알고 싶습니다. 나중에 돈 많이 모으고 필리핀에서 사업하고 싶습니다. 가족도 많이 도와주고 아마 대학원 다시 공부 다니고 싶습니다.
The women will provide childcare and do light housework for families, though what exactly that covers is vague. In return, they will be paid the country's minimum wage of 9,861 per hour, or about $7. For 14 hours of work, that adds up to about $1,800 a month, including mandatory insurance coverage, which is nearly half the average household income. Many South Koreans say it's too pricey.
같은 비용이라면 무조건 한국 사람으로 아마 할 것 같아요. 아무래도 이제 그 문화라든지 이런 것들도 같은 나라 사람이랑 하는 게 좀 더 좋으니까.
저는 이제 금전적인 거는 좀 해소가 되더라도 언어나 그리고 아이한테 끼치는 문화적 영향이 조금 우려가 돼서 별로 쓰고 싶지 않습니다.
금액적인 부분이 솔직히 부담은 가긴 해요. 제 생각에는 한 100만 원 선에서 하루에 한 5시간 정도는 가능하지 않을까?
The pilot program and its viability are a hot topic. Some experts and lawmakers from the ruling party have questioned whether foreign caregivers should be entitled to minimum wage, adding that the scheme does not serve the needs of the general public.
우리 국민들이 생각하는 가사 육아 도우미와 제도가 설계한 일종의 필리핀 이번에 도입된 이 제도는 상당히 좀 갭이 있는 것 아닌가 이런 생각을 합니다. 앞으로 이 필리핀뿐만 아니라 이 과사 관리사라든지 이 제도는 조금 더 고쳐져야 되는 것이 우리 국민들의 수요에 부응하는 거라고 생각을 합니다.
The program aims to plug a shortage of local caregivers, most of whom are paid by the hour with no insurance coverage. Professor Lee Joo-hee from Ewha Women's University says if Korean domestic helpers were given full-time work and the same benefits as their Filipino counterparts, there would be many South Korean women willing to do the job.
그렇게 쓸 돈이 있다면 일단 이 분야 최저임금도 잘 못 받고 이러니까 이 일자리 자체를 더 좋은 일자리로 만드는 데 써야 되고, 그래서 내국인 노동을 먼저 하고, 왜냐하면 한국의 여성 노동시장 참여율도 굉장히 낮거든요.
Data from Statistics Korea show that in 2022, there are about 107,000 domestic workers in the country, with more than 90% aged 50 years old and above.
빈곤 때문에 노동시장으로 떠밀려 나가는 중장년 여성들이 굉장히 많고, 또 동시에 그 연령대 비경제활동 인구도 되게 많아요. 50, 60이 돼서는 솔직히 아기를 볼 필요도 없고 풀타임으로 일할 수 있는 거잖아요. 그럼 이 일자리를 풀타임으로 만든다면 노동력이 2배가 늘어날 수도 있는 것이고.
Professor Lee does not think bringing in foreign workers will solve South Korea's demographic crisis. She points out that birth rates in Singapore and Hong Kong are among the world's lowest, despite a decades-long reliance on foreign domestic workers. CNA approached some of the Filipino caregivers as they were returning to their dormitories. But they refused to be interviewed, which is not surprising, since the authorities and the 2 government-certified domestic service providers taking care of these Filipinos all declined to comment.
For more on this story, we have Yun Suk herself joining us once again from Seoul. Yun Suk, perhaps you could tell us what's the future of this pilot project? Because based on the story that you've covered, it seems that the locals themselves don't seem very, they have a number of concerns, one of which is the fact that it costs about 1,800 USD per month to hire these workers.
Well, yes, definitely. And that's why there are lots of debates now on, how this should change, since the plan is to continue with this and bring in more Philippine caregivers to the country. Now, if this is a success, this pilot program, then the Seoul government here is planning to bring in about 500 next year and up to 1,000 by 2028. But, they will have to somehow try to change this, because earlier this year, the Seoul mayor, Oh Se-yoon, and also the labor minister, Lee Jung-sik, were very eager to brief the local and the foreign media here about the plans to bring in the foreign workers and how, this was going to help resolve issues like birth rates and also getting young South Koreans to get married, have children without the burden of having to look after their children. And I think among the South Korean public, there was a lot of interest in this, especially because in the beginning, the Seoul mayor, Oh Se-yoon, was saying that the Filipinos would not be paid the minimum wage and that the amount that the South Koreans will have to pay per month would be much lower. But apparently, because South Korea belongs to is a member of this international labor organization, it could not bring them on lower wages and had to pay them the country's minimum, which is now the biggest issue here in Korea, because many just feel that, it's just too much. And even average South Korean families won't be able to pay this. And so, surveys here have shown that half of those South Koreans who are hiring these Filipino caregivers on this pilot program during the 6-month period are those living in the affluent Gangnam district. And also, the Filipinos, when I went to meet them, they're also staying in Gangnam. And so there are lots of negative comments about this whole program and how it's only really benefiting the rich using taxpayers' money, because these Filipino caregivers will also be receiving all the benefits like insurances and pension. So no one, from the Seoul Metropolitan Government or the Labor Ministry now is talking to local or the foreign media about this whole thing. They're just trying to sort of keep this very low on their profile. And I think they're just waiting for all these negative sentiments to die down.
When I was looking at your story, it was quite impressive. The foreign workers that you interviewed could speak very fluent Korean, or what sounds like it at least. But nevertheless, I'm sure there will be possible issues, right, such as cultural differences, maybe a lack of clarity of a job scope. Where are they going to hang out on their days off, that sort of thing. So are there measures taken to deal with these issues?
Well, I think the government's trying to come up with measures, except I don't think they know what they're getting into. And, that Filipino we just heard, she wasn't speaking fluent Korean. It was really very basic. And so there are lots of concerns here that, that there will definitely be some kind of miscommunication problems, misunderstanding. And, we're trying to find out what they were here, what kind of training they were going to get before they're deployed or they go into their employees' homes. And we got this video clip, which you showed earlier, and it showed, them learning this popular Korean song here that's popular among Korean children called Baby Shark. And so I guess the Filipinos are being trained on how to play with Korean children or, to learning about what Korean people like. But, it is going to be very difficult, I think, because definitely there is going to be, especially this cultural differences between Philippine and also the language, too. And so I think it's going to be very important that they do learn the Korean culture, because also, I'm thinking that communication problems, because, yes, we've been told that they picked up Korean before they came here. But according to one official who I spoke to, did say that some of them spoke Korean, but some of them also didn't speak it very well. So I'm not sure how they're going to be communicating with the employees. And so, it's very possible that the miscommunication could also lead to bigger issues. And also another issue that South Koreans have is that, most of the South Korean homes here have 2 bedrooms or maybe 3 if the children are big enough, but it's not possible for the caregivers caregivers to live in. And so they'll be living separately. And, even if there were rooms, Korean families don't usually like to have someone like babysitters or domestic workers living in with them. And so I think that is also a cultural gap, which I don't think the South Korean government or the Seoul metropolitan government thought about when they decided to bring them in.
Yeah, a lot of getting used to, especially when you have somebody living in the same house as you. So Yun Suk, I want to understand a little bit more about how this pilot project, right, with these Filipino workers, how does it differ from the current system with, say, local Korean workers in terms of cost or wages that the employers must fork out?
Well, most domestic workers in Korea or the caregivers, unless it's for the elderly or the sick, they work part-time in South Korea. For example, I have someone who come in every Saturday to help clean my mother's house, and she works 4 hours and get paid about 70,000 won, which is about $52. Now, there are times when she might go and work at another house in the afternoon if she's lucky, if she can find another place, but otherwise it's really all that she's going to be getting for that one day. And since there's no guarantee that there's work every day, it's very difficult for these people to keep on doing these jobs. And most domestic workers here are paid hourly, like our helper too. And that's why that professor in that package was saying that if these women were going to be paid the full benefits like insurances, pension, and also be guaranteed a full-time job, then there will be many people here in South Korea, especially in their 50s and 60s, who'll be willing to work as caregivers. Now, some in that group of women could, be those who have had full-time jobs in the past, but they had to give it up because they had children or needed to be home to take care of them. Or they could be women who are barely surviving, making a living, doing temporary jobs and being paid by the hour. And, people like them will really jump at the opportunity that these Filipino caregivers are being given. And that's why lots of criticisms against this whole plan, and with many saying perhaps they should do something to help the South Korean women here first, giving them full-time jobs and all the pensions and all the insurances before they start bringing in foreign helpers here to South Korea.
Yeah, from the sound of it, lots of issues to be hammered out. Thanks so very much for your insights and thoughts there, Lim Yun Suk, speaking to us from Seoul.